Hello students, welcome to Recitals in Depth. In this episode, we are going to discuss the topics covered under the section of Polity and Governance for the month of October 2024. The topics that we are going to cover are broadly falling under the broader themes of criminal justice system, important governmental schemes, various judgments by the Supreme Court or High Courts of our country, legal doctrines, and lastly, key legislations. Stay tuned. Hello students, welcome to Recitals in Depth. So let's come to see the topics that we are going to cover in this particular session. So again, we have got a huge list of topics that is going to be covered in this particular episode, and the approach is going to be the same. That is, we are going to demolish every topic and by understanding the core of the core concept and how it applies to whether the pre-examination or for the mains examination. So now let's jump to the first topic, which is SARTHIE 1.0. So now let's try to understand this particular topic. So what is the proper context behind learning this particular topic? So recently, the Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment had launched this initiative by the name of SARTHIE 1.0. Now, since Ministry has launched this initiative very recently, so from the examinations point of view, we have to know the details and the nuances with respect to this particular scheme. So now let us try to understand what is this SARTHIE 1.0 all about. So there are two important bodies which are involved in the designing and implementation of this scheme. The first is the Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment. This particular ministry is concerned with designing the policies and implementing the policies specially designed for the upliftment of marginalized and vulnerable communities. Like, who are those communities? For example, poor, scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, minorities, senior citizens, beggars, etc. And secondly, the other stakeholder in implementing and designing this SARTHIE 1.0 initiative is NALSA, that is National Legal Services Authority. And this institution was created under the Act of Legal Services Act of 1987 with a primary agenda to provide legal aid to whom? To again for the vulnerable communities. So what these two organizations or the institutions did, that these two institutions came together and launched SARTHIE initiative with a primary aim of creating awareness about the various schemes and policies of the government which this particular ministry is implementing, so that this vulnerable communities will be able to take benefit of the schemes. So that is the core of the core aim, or say the agenda or the preamble with respect to the SARTHIE 1.0. Now, before we go on and discuss the various objectives, what is the need for this particular scheme? Now, as we already discussed, the need is very simple, that all the marginalized and the deprived communities of our country, whether it be scheduled caste, scheduled tribes, senior citizens or beggars, denotified tribes, these people are facing various kind of deprivations in their life. Deprivations in the food, deprivations in nutrition, deprivations in dignified living, whether be it housing, deprivations in the realm of health and education. And these communities and majority of the persons who are belonging to these communities, they are striving for their day-to-day income by providing their labor to the market. Now, in this condition, imagine a situation when we as aspirants, when we are preparing for the civil services examination, when we ourselves are not aware about the various schemes and the governments, various schemes which is actually being implemented by the government of our country Can you imagine that such kind of people who are striving day in and day out to earn just the bread for the day, they will be aware about the schemes of the government, although these schemes are there for the development of these communities only. So ultimately, with the help of SARTHIE 1.0 initiative, what government is trying to do is to provide good governance by providing right information. That is, by making these beneficiaries more and more aware about various kind of initiatives which are being run by the government of India for their own upliftment. So that is the core of the core need behind launching of this SARTHIE 1.0 initiative. Now let us try to come to see the objectives. Now, as we already discussed, that there is a huge information gap with respect to what kind of schemes the government is implementing, and secondly, whether the schemes are being known by the persons who are the potential beneficiaries to it. So what SARTHIE 1.0 strives to do is that both the Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment along with NALSA, they are going to conduct various kind of webinars, seminars, workshops, pakhwadas, so as to promote awareness about the various schemes of socio-economic development which is being implemented by the scheme, so that the potential beneficiaries, however deprived they are, they should be able to know that the government is trying to implement certain policies for their own social development, so that these people will be having the awareness and the empowerment to actually access the government and derive the benefits out of those schemes. So following from the point number 1 is the point number 2, that is legal assistance. But legal assistance for what? So SARTHIE 1.0 is also going to provide legal assistance to those vulnerable peoples, as we already discussed, if they are facing any kind of problem in accessing the services provided by the government of our country. So that any particular person who is belonging to any vulnerable section, they should not be denied the services which are due to them by the government of India, so that the SARTHIE will provide them legal assistance to make them access the services in the best way possible, which will ultimately lead to more and more social development. So that is the core and the core objective with respect to the SARTHIE 1.0. Now let us try to see the features behind this SARTHIE 1.0. Now, as we already know that by following this agenda of the SARTHIE 1.0, it is being converged with the United Nations Sustainable Development Agenda of 2030, particularly with respect to the SDG goal number 1, that is reducing extreme poverty, and secondly the Sustainable Development Goal number 10, that is reducing inequality. Now, as we know that as more and more people who are belonging to the vulnerable sections will be accessing the services which are being provided by the government of our country, ultimately it will lead to reductions in their deprivations, and secondly it will provide them with more and more opportunities to be a part of the economic development of our country, which will give them dignified livelihood. And that is the core of the core feature behind designing of this SARTHIE. Secondly, as this SARTHIE initiative is a collaborative effort by the Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment along with NALSA. Now here one very important trend we can see, that this particular body belongs to the executive wing of the government, and secondly NALSA belongs to the judiciary. So this means that SARTHIE 1.0 is a very like social justice driven initiative with a synergy and the collaboration of both the executive and judiciary to provide for the upliftment of marginalized and vulnerable communities. Thirdly is we need to understand the outreach strategy which has been deployed by the SARTHIE 1.0 initiative. Now, since the vulnerable communities, whether be it beggars or denotified tribes, anyone, they are so deprived that they are actually cut off from the information networks, whether be it social media, etc. So what SARTHIE 1.0 strives to deliver is that they want to reach out to the grassroots of our society. And how they can do that? It can be achieved only through involving grassroots organizations as well. So what NALSA is trying to do is that NALSA is trying to rope in both the State Legal Services Authority and the District Legal Services Authority, which will take help of their volunteers to conduct various kind of workshops, which will lead to awareness generations with respect to the various governmental schemes. So this was all about the outreach strategy. Now let's try to focus on the last point, which is the focus areas which is being put forward by the SARTHIE 1.0 initiative. So SARTHIE 1.0 initiative, as we already know, that it is trying to generate more and more awareness with respect to the schemes, acts and rules of the various governmental schemes which is being implemented. So in this pursuit, there are 4 legislations which the SARTHIE 1.0 initiative is trying to create more awareness about. So the first is Protection of Civil Rights Act. Second is the Transgender Protection of Rights Act 2019. The third is Manual Scavenger Act, and the fourth is a very important one, and especially for the senior citizens or the aging people, is the Maintenance and Welfare of Parents and Senior Citizens. So with the SARTHIE 1.0 initiative, NALSA and the Ministry of Social Justice is trying to create more and more awareness with respect to the various kind of modalities associated with these 4 laws, and also what kind of benefits the target groups or the target beneficiaries will be able to achieve through the proper implementation of these 4 laws. So ultimately this was all about the first topic. Now let's come to the second topic, which is Jal Hi Amrit initiative. As if you'll remember it very prominently, in the last episode also we had discussed a very important topic, that was Amrut 2.0, and in that episode I had talked about the importance of urbanization on one hand and its correlationship with the water usage or the water scarcity or the water stress which is being faced by the cities of our country, and this particular topic is also pertaining to the same domain. So now let us try to understand this particular topic. So what is this context? So recently Ministry of Jal Shakti, it launched the Jal Hi Amrit initiative under Amrut 2.0. Now if you remember it, in the last month's first video or first topic, we had covered Amrut 2.0 in quite detail. So before we could actually appreciate what does this Jal Hi Amrit initiative actually is, first of all we need to understand what is this Amrut 2.0 in very brief, because we have already covered it in the previous episodes, and from there we will be able to connect it to the current understanding of this particular topic. So what is this Amrut 2.0? If you'll remember, it is a good opportunity for you guys to revise it as well. Amrut 2.0 had 2 very important components. Firstly, it provided for universal coverage of what? Of functional taps for drinking water in all 4,700 statutory towns. And secondly, it provided for 100% coverage of sewage and septage management. In 500 cities, which was initially identified by the Amrut. Mind it, students, it is Amrut and not Amrut 2.0. So there are 2 major objectives of Amrut 2.0, that is universal or 100% coverage of functional tap water connections for drinking water in 4,700 statutory towns of our country, and secondly 100% sewage and septage management infrastructure in 500 cities which were earlier identified under the Amrut. Now the Jal Hi Amrit initiative actually starts from or originates from the second objective of Amrut 2.0, that is establishment of sewage and septage management infrastructure in 500 cities. So what does this Jal Hi Amrit initiative stands for is that it provides for the efficient management of sewage treatment plants in various cities. That is the core objective of Jal Hi Amrit, and ultimately this objective is finding its origin in the second objective which was enlisted in the Amrut 2.0. However, what we need to understand over here is that why government is so inclined to actually provide for efficient management of sewage treatment plants. Although this topic is pertaining to the broader topic of water usage, water scarcity. However, why the government is inclined towards effective management of STP? And for that, we need to understand the core nuances of wastewater treatment in our country. Okay, so Niti Aayog had released a very important report by the name of Urban Wastewater Scenario in India. Now, according to this particular report, very important insights we could get about the sewage treatment systems in our country. So, according to this report, India, in all total, generates 72,368 million liters per day of sewage. Now, out of it, only 32,000 million liters per day is being treated. After the treatment of sewage, we will get treated wastewater, which can be reused in various other sectors like agriculture, like industries, like cleaning purposes, etc. Now, from the numbers, what we can see over there is that only 32,000 MLD is getting treated by the existing infrastructure which is there in our country, which means that only 28% of the total sewage which is being generated is getting treated. And 72% of all the generated is ultimately getting drained into our rivers, lakes, and other water bodies. What does it mean? That ultimately we are well aware of the increasing lake pollution in various cities of our country. For example, it is not an unknown fact about the condition of river Yamuna in Delhi, or whether be it the Belandur lake in Bangalore, which is generating various kind of toxic foams, because the lake or the rivers are being drained with untrained or untreated sewage containing various kind of pollutants, which is not only depleting the fragile ecosystem, but it also has a very important and very heavy bearing on the public health of our country, because it is ultimately promoting more and more waterborne diseases. So, to provide for a more of a win-win situation for the urban areas, both in the development and the protection and preservation of fragile ecosystems like rivers, lakes or wetlands, and to promote the public health by declining the incidences of various waterborne diseases, what government thought that it will be very important that if we could increase this percentage of treated wastewater, where the global average is roughly around 70%, India is treating only 20% of the solid waste or the sewage waste India is generating. So to promote the cities of our country, so that they will be able to treat more and more sewage or the septage waste, this Jal Hi Amrit initiative was launched by the Ministry of Jal Shakti. Now let us try to understand what kind of sewage treatment looks like in our country. So with respect to the map, this bluish areas are such areas which is having almost 100% sewage treatment capacity. That is, the amount of waste that is they are generating, they are able to treat it also and they are able to use it. Secondly, so what pattern we can see it over here is that there is again a west to east axis which divides the sewage treatment capacity of our country. Now, with respect to this particular axis, all the states west to it are at least faring better as compared to the eastern states, leaving apart certain exception states like Karnataka, which are lying in a general or an average category with respect to the sewage treatment. Similarly, with respect to the performance of the state, what we can understand from this particular graph is that again what we have already witnessed over here in this particular section, same thing has been put over here in the form of data. However, what we can see is that even with the cities which having more than 10 lakh population, we can see that sewage generation, this light blue and dark blue is the installed capacity. There is a great degree of gap with respect to all the cities. Various kind of cities are there. And similarly, there exists a significant proportion of infrastructural gap with respect to the treatment of sewage. Similarly, in state-wise, Chandigarh, Haryana and Himachal Pradesh performs the best with respect to the installed sewage capacity and how they are able to manage the various kind of sewage generations, and they are providing proper treated water, wastewater. So now let's come to the Jal Hi Amrit initiative and how ultimately it will work. Now, as we already noted, the aim is quite clear of Jal Hi Amrit initiative, that it wants to promote better management of what? As we already noted, the sewage treatment plants, so that ultimately these sewage treatment plants will provide more and more treated wastewater, TWW for short, treated wastewater, which can be reused for various purposes. That is the core aim. However, how it is going to do it? What is the how element of it? So, what the Jal Hi Amrit initiative is trying to envisage is that it is going to provide incentives to the state government if they are under conditions. These are conditional incentives, which is state government will be provided incentives if it is found that they are managing the STPs in a very efficient manner, and secondly, there is a reuse of treated waste water. Now, ultimately, when we know that under the Jal Hi Amrit initiative, state government will be provided incentives if the state government is found to be managing their STPs in a well-rounded manner. However, what we need to understand is that what are those conditions? So, the conditions are very simple. First of all, we need to understand that how these conditions will function. So, all the urban local bodies which are in charge of these sewage treatment plants will provide all the data with respect to various kind of various kind of STPs which they are operating. So they will put all the data with respect to the sewage treatment plant in the Amrit 2.0 portal. Now, what kind of data will the ULBs will put? What kind of the quantity of sewage which is being generated within their jurisdiction, what kind of sewage treatment infrastructure they have created, what is the final level of sewage they are being treated, MLD in million liters day capacity. And after putting the data in the Amrit 2.0 portal, this data will be verified and an analysis will be done by a third party system. A third party independent assessment will take place. Independent assessment will take place. And based on that independent third party assessment and analysis, the sewage treatment plants of every ULP will be provided certain star ratings. Star ratings which will go for 3-star to 4-star and 5-star. And based on the star rating or the performance, 3 being the lowest and 5 being the maximum, based on the star rating which will be provided to the sewage treatment plants of any particular ULB, there are different kind of incentives which are there which will be provided to the ULB. Okay, so what kind of incentives? So if a sewage treatment plant is getting a 3-star, so based on the capacity of what they are trying to treat with respect to the sewage, they will be providing incentives from 0.25 crores to 3 crores, and similarly from 0.75 crores to 8 crores for 5-star STPs. So this is what we need to understand. From the examination point of view, we do not have to mug up these numbers. However, what we need to understand is how the schemes are being designed, how the government is trying to very objectively categorize the operations and functionalities of any particular STP or sewage treatment plant, and based on their performance, government is trying to incentivize them. So the motto is very simple. If any STP is performing very good, they will be getting more and more reward or incentives. And if any STP or ULB is not performing good, they will be not provided any incentives, so that only those efforts will be rewarded through which more and more sewage is getting treated. So that is the core mechanism and functioning of the Jal Hi Amrit initiative. Now let us try to understand that what is the significance of this. Now, as we already noted in the previous section as well, that the quantum of sewage which is getting treated in our country is very less. That is almost roughly approximately 28%. However, the global average in the advanced countries like USA and Western Europe is roughly following around 75%. So the core significance through more and more sewage treatment, what we can see is that the water conservation. Now, as we already note that India amounts for only 4% of water resources of the world. However, India caters to 16% of global population. So which means that naturally there is a water stress and water scarcity is there. So one of the prominent ways from where we can address the issue of water scarcity is by reusing the treated waste water. And that is why it is a very important step towards water conservation and sustainability. Secondly, as we already noted, that all the untreated sewage is again getting drained into the rivers, lakes or the wetlands or any other local water bodies like ponds. So ultimately it will lead to the environmental protection both of the fragile ecosystems and the biodiversity which is contained in those ecosystems. Thirdly, as the untreated sewage is getting dumped into the rivers, it is leading to more and more waterborne diseases. And in the same report which we had learned earlier, that the report which was published by the Niti Aayog, that is urban wastewater scenario in our country, it had noted that because India is not investing enough in the sewage treatment plants, India is paying roughly to the tunes of $15 million annually towards the cost towards the public health. And lastly, since this particular scheme will provide incentives, so the ULBs will be able to go for more capacity development. The ULBs will be able to use that extra money to develop more and more infra and to deploy more and more modern technology like the SCADA, which is short for supervisory control and data acquisition, and secondly, online continuous effluent monitoring system, that is OSEMS. So these kind of technologies can be deployed by the increased revenues or incentives which a particular urban local body is getting by the virtue of Jal Hi Amrit scheme. Now, what are the possible challenges which any ULB might face with respect to the implementation of Jal Hi Amrit initiative? So it is not a very unknown fact that ultimately there is a very inadequate infrastructure with all the ULBs. So majority of the ULBs, they are not having sewage treatment plants. Leave apart providing for a better modern technology, they are not even having sewage treatment plants. To give you an example, of all the sewage which is generated in Bihar, only 1% is getting treated. Imagine. So Bihar is the flag bearer of mal governance in our country with respect to the sewage management. However, this 1% for India, the average is roughly 28%. Imagine how backwardly Bihar is in with respect to the sewage treatment as compared to the other states. Similarly, there is resource crunch with the ULPs, as we already know that the ULBs are not able to generate revenues for meeting their basic expenses. Now, when it comes to deploying more and more STPs in their particular area, STPs, establishment of STPs comes with a lot of capital expenditure. Capital expenditure to the tune of almost 60 lakhs to 8 crores. If we need to establish or institute any sewage treatment plant, this will be the roughly cost. And secondly, after capital expenditure, there will be cost associated with operation and maintenance. And in a situation where ULBs of our country or the urban local bodies of our country are already running from pillar to post to garner any kind of resources, it will be very difficult for them to actually garner such heavy resources so as to establish the sewage treatment plants. The third is regulatory and compliance issues. Now, as we know that there is a very poor enforcement, very lax enforcement with respect to the environmental norms of our country, and because of this poor enforcement there will be less supervision, and ultimately this less supervision will lead to bad utilization or poor utilization of the funds under the Jal Hi Amrit initiative. The fourth important point which we need to note over here are the geographical factors. Now, it is very, very difficult to establish an infrastructure of STP in hilly terrains. Say for example, there are various important hill stations like Shimla or Mussoorie. Now, as tourists are flooding those areas, it is creating into a lot of resulting into the creation of a lot of sewage, and ultimately since the terrain is very hilly, there is no space for the creation of STPs in those areas, and it creates for a very difficult situation with respect to the Jal Hi Amrit initiative. And lastly, the public awareness. The core of the core issue boils down to the public consciousness, whether the public themselves are realizing the mess and the nuances of sewage treatment and what kind of harm it is causing to the larger society. So these are the various challenges with respect to the Jal Hi Amrit initiative. So the next topic is Universal Postal Union. So now let's try to understand why we are trying to learn this particular topic. So the context was that recently UPU, or Universal Postal Union for short, it celebrated its 150th anniversary. And that from that thing we can make that it's a very important international organization. And since it celebrated its 150th anniversary, the Department of Post, it released a commemorative postal stamp. So that was the core context, and for this particular reason, this particular institution was under the news. So what is this UPU all about? What are its objectives and functions? So UPU, or Universal Postal Union, was formed in the year of 1874, and it is the second oldest international institution only after International Telecommunication Union. And this UPU was formed by the Treaty of Bern. Treaty of burn, and it serves as a primary forum. Primary forum. But for what? For all the stakeholders of postal sector. Now, since we know that this institution was created in the year of 1874, however, in the year of 1948, it became a specialized wing of United Nations, thereby expanding its role in managing the postal supplies across the world. Managing and supervising the postal supplies across the world. Since UN comprises of member countries which basically comprises the world, that is why it enables and supervises the postal exchanges, whether it be parcels or letters or any other article across the world. So this was the brief about the Universal Postal Union. Now if we need to understand like what is the core objective of Universal Postal Union, which is very easy, that is to standardize postal regulations. What do we mean by that? Now, as we know that every country is following their own postal regulations, and if we want that a mail or a parcel from one country should be able to reach the parcel or any customer in another country, now there will be an interaction of systems which are deployed in two different countries. However, there has to be some limited standardization of the postal regulations which is governing the processes in two different countries, and that is the job of Universal Postal Union, so that it will standardize postal regulations, which will in a way standardize the various kind of mechanisms and processes which are being followed by the Department of Post of various countries across the world, so that there will be a minimum degree of cooperation and coordination, so that ultimately it will lead to seamless exchange of mails, parcels or any other articles across the member country of UPU. That is the core objective behind the formation of Universal Postal Union. However, to achieve the objective, what kind of functions are the UPU is playing? So the first important function which the UPU is playing, that the UPU acts as a liaising, mediating and as an advisory body to members of UPU. That is, if the UPU feels that any particular member country is not able to coordinate with any other member country of the UPU, then in that case it will be a liaising body. Secondly, if there is any dispute with respect to the two countries which are members of UPU and they are not able to exchange mails, etc., then in that case UPU will act as a mediating agency. And thirdly, UPU will also act as an advisory body, so as to nudge or encourage the member countries to adopt various kind of best practices or standardize their procedures with respect to the guidelines issued by the UPU, which ultimately wants to achieve the same objective of seamless exchange of mails and parcels across the world. Second important point which we need to note over here is that it sets the rules which every member country has to follow, so that there is more and more increased exchanges of mails, parcels, etc. And thirdly, it also publishes regulations for customer satisfaction. That is, ultimately, if any particular person is receiving a particular mail or a parcel or a package from the Department of Post, they should be satisfied. So it also issues various kind of broader regulations with respect to the customer satisfaction and how the customer experiences with respect to the usage of the Department of Post can be enhanced, so that the customer should be ultimately at the end of the day happy, and they should be able to use the Department of Post more and more. So this was the core functions which are being played by the Universal Postal Union. Now let us try to understand the various kind of members which are present over there within the UPU. So ultimately UPU, it comprises of 192 members. All the members of UN can become a member of UPU. If any particular country who is not a party to United Nations, they can also become a member of UPU, given that 2/3 of the members approve to it. That is a simple mechanism through which a country who is not a member of UN will be able to become a member of UPU if 2/3 members of the UPU approve that particular country can become a member of the UPU. One important fact which we need to note over here is that the headquarters is located in Bern, which is the capital of Switzerland. So this is important from the prelims point of view. Now we need to understand the organizational structure of UPU as well. So ultimately the UPU consists of 4 important bodies. From the prelims point of view only it is very relevant. However, we do not have to go into quite depth that we are mugging up what kind of activities these all bodies are doing. However, there is the most important body within the UPU, which is the Congress. And Congress is what, as from the name is suggesting, Congress is the aggregation or when all the parties of the UPU are trying to meet. So ultimately Congress is the supreme authority of UPU, which meets every 4 years. That is very important from the prelims point of view. The second is the Council of Administration. That is, this particular council administers or ensures that that there has been a continuity of UPU's Congress. That is, whenever a UPU Congress is meeting after 4 years, so the Council of Administration will ensure that whatever agenda has been initiated, say in the year of 2024, it will be carried forward to the year of 2028 as well, and same thing will be considered over here. So it will create a sense of continuity in the working of the Congress of the UPU. The third is the Postal Operations Council, which is the technical and the logistical or the operational mind behind the functioning of the UPU, and it creates various kind of regulations with respect to the seamless exchange of mails across the member countries of the UPU. And lastly, the International Bureau, which acts as a secretariat or the international secretariat to the UPU, so that its core role should be mediating and liaising with not only with the member countries but also with other international organizations working for the postal sector or other stakeholders. So this was about the organizational structure of the UPU. Now let's try to understand the significance of UPU. Now, as we know that the UPU is providing for the standardization of regulations which is governing the postal sector. So ultimately it will lead to global accessibility of postal services, because imagine a situation which is where a country which is least developed country of Africa, which is not having prominent infrastructure which is necessary for the development of Department of Post in that particular country. So UPU or the Universal Postal Union with its standardized regulations will be able to guide that country so that the people who are the residents or citizens of those countries will be able to access the services of postal department. So which will enhance very important things, that is, it will foster relationships, it will provide for more and more collaboration among the countries, and thirdly, it will deepen the globalization. It will deepen the wave of globalization. The second important thing which we need to note over here is that since with the help of standardized postal regulations, it is encouraging more and more relationship among the member countries, and it is allowing seamless transfer of mails, parcels, packages between the countries. Ultimately, the point one will definitely lead to the global cooperation. Since more and more exchanges of people, parcels and ideas will take place, ultimately it will lead to more and more global cooperation as well. Now, the third important point which we need to note over here is the adapting to technological advancements. Now, as we already know that the technology is growing at a very booming speed. And secondly, with the help of the technology like internet and increased logistical support, one very important change that we are witnessing today is e-commerce. And it is the e-commerce which is keeping the department of our post or parcels very relevant. Now, as we know that whenever we want to shop anything or whenever we go to a market, first of all, we check the prices either in Flipkart or Amazon or any e-commerce platforms. And that is why the role of e-commerce players and the Department of Post and Parcels is growing multifold. And with the change of technology, with the adoption of more and more technological advancements, what the Department of Post, not only in India but across the world, has to realize that if they want to be relevant in the growing era of e-commerce, they also have to adapt to the technological advancements which is taking place. And that is why UPU also plays a very significant role with respect to the nudging and encouraging the stakeholders in adapting the various modern technologies. The last point which we need to note over here is the innovation and inclusivity. That is, now when the UPU is encouraging member countries to adopt to technologies, it does not mean that it does not come with inclusivity. That is, UPU will also focus on such areas which are very least developed and very remote, so that their geographical limitation or their developmental limitation should not become a hurdle with respect to accessing of the postal regulations. And these are the points that we need to understand, that what are the important and pertinent roles which are being played by the Universal Postal Union. So this was all for this topic. Now let's come to the next topic. Now the next topic for discussion is DhartiAaba Janjatiya Gram UtkarshAbhiyan. Now from the pic itself you can see that it is for the empowerment of tribal communities. So let us try to understand what is the scheme is all about and what kind of approach this scheme is trying to give for the upliftment of the tribal communities. So what is the context behind this particular topic? So recently Prime Minister Modi ji, it launched this particular scheme, in the state of Jharkhand with a budgetary outlay of a humongous 80,000 crores. So as we can see it from the allotted budgetary funds as well, that the government is showing a great degree of interest in the development and the upliftment of tribal communities. Now, as we know that India is performing very good with respect to the economic development of our country, and the economic development is also catering more and more opportunities for the various sections of our society also to take part in the development of our country. Now, in the bright spot which India has become in the world with respect to the economic and social development, whereby India has taken millions of people out of the poverty. However, still, after performing so well in the economic realm, there are various sections of our society which are facing various kinds of deprivations. And one of the core hotspot of such deprivations is the community of scheduled tribes. And the core philosophy behind launching this particular scheme is that the scheduled tribe community as a whole is facing various kind of deprivations, and it will require a multi-collaborative approach and effort by the government of India, not only just by the Ministry of Tribal Affairs, but also by converging the initiatives of various other ministries so as to provide for a holistic development and upliftment of tribal communities. So that is the core of the core aim of this particular scheme, which is to provide for socio-economic upliftment of tribal communities by focusing on development of villages. That is the core issue that we need to understand over here. The core axis of focus over here is the development of villages of tribals by providing them with necessary infrastructure, so that it will provide them with more and more opportunities to be a part of the growth story of our country. So this whole scheme will provide for the, as we already noted, that the scheme's name is Gram Utkarsh, which means that ultimately this scheme is trying to develop the villages which are being habitated by the tribals of our country. So that is the core scheme. And second point that we had noted is that development is a multifaceted process. To provide to provide development to a particular community, it is not only just about generating more and more income. It is more about getting them a complete ecosystem and an environment where different stakeholders will come together. For example, imagine a tribal village. Now in this particular village, there is shortage of water. People are not getting clean drinking water. There is no electricity. There are no primary health centers over there. The school for the children is quite far from the village. There is no road or internet connectivity in that particular village. So that is why, if we really want to provide for meaningful and holistic development of tribal communities, we need to make sure that the villages of the tribal communities are developed in a very holistic manner. And that is why one of the core features of this particular initiative is the interministerial interventions. But before we actually get into that, first of all, let's try to come to the coverage of it. So with the help of the budgetary outlay that we had already witnessed, that is, government is roughly providing 80,000 crores. Out of which center will give 56,000 crores, and it is encouraging the state to pitch in for the 24,000 crores which is left. Second point is about the coverage, that this scheme is targeting the coverage of almost 55,000 tribal dominated villages, and ultimately the benefit will reach to 5 crore tribal people of our country. And as we already noticed, that the third point and the most important point is the interministerial intervention, that development is a multifaceted process. And it is not only about the interventions of one particular ministry. It is about how different ministries who are working independently for the benefit of the society as a whole, how their interventions are being weaved together or converged together so as to bring in real change in the ground. So in pursuit of this convergence of schemes of or the developmental schemes which is run by various ministries, this particular scheme is trying to weave almost 25 interventions which is being implemented by 17 line ministries. And what are those ministries? These ministries are, for example, Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, Ministry of Women and Child Development, Ministry of Tourism, Ministry of Skill Development and Entrepreneurship. So what this scheme is trying to do is to provide a convergence with respect to the interventions of the ministries which are concerned for the development of tribal communities. And every ministry, whether be it health, whether be it Ministry of Women and Child, whether be it Ministry of Tourism or Skill Development or Entrepreneurship, these ministries are taking various kind of interventions which are definitely trying to benefit the tribal communities. However, this Gram Utkarsh Yojana, what it is trying to do is that it is trying to create more and more convergence among the interventions to achieve certain goals. And what are these goals? To understand the goals, now let's come to the next section. So there are 4 important goals which this particular scheme tries to achieve. So the first is developing enabling infrastructure. Now as we know that the core focus and the locus of development of this particular scheme is the village. So what do we have to develop infrastructure in the village? Firstly, housing. So first of all, every eligible house, every eligible scheduled tribe should be having a pakka house. And how the government is trying to address it? Through the Pradhan, Mantri, Awas, Yojana, Gramin. This topic again we had discussed in the previous section. Secondly, it will also focus on developing of village infrastructure. What kind of village infrastructure? Suppose road infra. How? Through the Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana. It will be taken care of by Ministry of Rural Development. Secondly, the BharatNet project for internet connectivity. It will be taken care of by METI. So these are the infrastructure that has to be done. And from here, what we can observe is that this scheme is trying to weave in on or converge the various initiatives which are being taken by the individual ministries, and they are trying to converge it so as to provide the holistic benefit and development of a tribal village. Second important point which we need to note over here is the promotion of economic empowerment. How we can empower them economically? First of all, by providing them with requisite skill. So, under the Skill India mission of which is run by Ministry of Skill Development and Entrepreneurship, it will make sure that skills or vocational education will be provided. Vocational education will be provided to all the 10th and 12th pass students so as to provide them with livelihood. Second, a very important concept which is coming over here is of tribal homestays. Now, to leverage the tourism potential of the tribal areas, Ministry of Tourism under the Swadesh Darshan scheme. Swadesh Darshan scheme, it is trying to develop 1,000 tribal homestays. So that it will lead to remunerative employment generation for the tribal people. And thirdly, multi-purpose tribal marketing cooperatives, so that it will again provide for marketing of tribal goods, so that there will be less and less middlemen and customer can directly reach the tribal persons. And again, it will lead to more and more economic empowerment of the tribal communities. The third important point which we need to note over here is the universalization of access of good education. And how it will be achieved? By the construction of more and more Eklavya model residential schools, and secondly by Samagra Shiksha Abhiyan. By Samagra Shiksha Abhiyan. And lastly, healthy lives and dignified aging. One of the problems with tribal communities with respect to the public health is the increasing level of infant mortality rate and maternal mortality rate. So with the help of National Health Mission, the government of India is trying to bring down the infant mortality rate and the maternal mortality rate to the national average. Apart from it, more and more focus on immunization will be given. Immunization will be provided with the help of mobile medical units. So these are the prominent features or the goals which are to be achieved with the help of Gram Utkarsh Yojana. So this was all about the various nuances and features of this particular scheme. Now let's come to the next topic, which is story of Lady Justice. So recently, what is the context is that recently the Chief Justice of our country, it unveiled a very new statue in the Supreme Court premises. That is the new statue of Lady Justice. Now, let us come to understand this particular topic in quite depth. Now, this topic is a very interesting topic, and the statue of Lady Justice is very ubiquitous. That is, we must have seen this particular statue in various Hindi movies or Bollywood movies or whichever movies you are, regional movie you are watching in your own regional languages. So, what is the particular need for that particular changing of that particular statue, and what does the statue signify? Now, let us try to understand it. So, we recently we discussed the context as well, that the Chief Justice of our country, it unveiled a new statue which is almost 6 feet tall in the Supreme Court premises. Now, before we go on and discuss that, why did the government of India and the Supreme Court thought to bring in this new changed version of the Lady Justice or the sculpture of the Lady Justice? But before we go on and do that, first of all, we need to understand that what is the history of Lady Justice. So ultimately, the history of Lady Justice can be traced back to the Roman mythology. Roman mythology, where there was a goddess of justice by the name of Justita. And it is believed that the prominent sculpture or the statue of Lady of Justice is derived from this Roman mythology, or it is inspired from the goddess of justice, that is Justita. However, there are certain important iconography or tenets or features of this Lady Justice that we need to understand. So ultimately, I am sure that you must have seen this sculpture in various movies as well. So it has become a very prominent tenet of Indian movies as well, that whenever there is some kind of injustice, people used to say that Kanun is blind, it's a Andha Kanun. So ultimately, that is what we need to understand over here. So what are the important features that we need to note over here? That first of all, we need to see that this Lady Justice is blindfolded. Secondly, there is a scale. Thirdly, there is a sword. Now first come to the symbolism of being blindfolded. Now, as we already know that this particular old sculpture or the statue of Lady Justice is inspired from the Roman mythology of goddess of justice, that is Justita. However, why it is blindfolded? So it is believed that during Renaissance, that is in 14th century, this blindfold was added to the statue of Lady Justice as a satire. Why? Because during that times, it was kind of that the legal systems of that time had turned a blind eye towards the suffering and the deprivations of various common citizenry. And the legal systems were not providing their basic duty, that is to provide the justice. And that is why, as a satire, this particular element of a blindfold was introduced in the statue of Lady Justice. However, when in the case of Enlightenment, which happened in 17th and 18th century, it was reinterpreted as that this blindfold symbolized that the law is impartial, and it also signifies that there is a equality before law, the core principle that we study in the article 14. So this blindfold, it symbolized equality before law and that the law is impartial, and since it is blindfolded, it is buffered from the influence of power, status and wealth, and it will consider every individual to be equal in front of the law. And that is why it was reinterpreted during the Enlightenment period as equality before law, this particular blindfolded. The second important point which we need to note over here are the scales. Now the scales symbolized that whenever there is a legal system, it will try to weigh the arguments, and based on the weight of the arguments only, it will be able to provide justice. And the last thing was the sword, and the sword represented the authority to punish. So this was the core of the core symbolism with respect to the whatever features which were present in the statue of Lady Justice. However, what has been the relationship of Lady Justice with our country? Now, as we know that we were under the British colonial rule for almost 200 years. And when Britishers established their political rule over India, they brought their legal system also in our country. As we know that Britishers only established our systems or system of courts, and when they brought their systems, they brought their legal symbols as well. And ultimately the statue of Lady Justice is nothing but a legal system which basically reflects or exudes certain ideology. And that is why this Lady Justice or the sculpture of Lady Justice is a very common feature in the Indian courts as well to this time. And to give you a particular example, for example, in the Kolkata High Court, which was the first High Court to be created in our country in the year of 1874, the statue of Lady Justice is incorporated in the pillars of the Kolkata High Court. However, one important point which we need to note over here is that in certain places it is with blindfold, and similarly at certain places it is without the blindfolds. And similar kind of sculpture is also present in the Bombay High Court as well. Now let us try to come to understand what kind of different features which has been incorporated in the recently launched statue of Lady Justice in our country, or Indianized statue of Lady Justice. So first of all, before we go on and discuss the comparative elements between the two statues, first of all we need to understand the need. So the need was very simple: to decolonize. Now as we know that Britishers had established the legal system in our country, and they had brought forward the legal symbols as well, and every symbol symbolizes certain ideology, certain meanings, and that is why India is in a very prominent route to decolonize or bring out the yoke of colonial symbols from our country. So, and to give you a further example, since India also repealed the IPC and CRPC which was instituted by the Britishers, and came up with Bhartiya Nyaya Sanhita or Bhartiya Nagarik Suraksha Sanhita. So the core reason behind this is the decolonizing aspect of it, so that Indians should be able to do justice with the Article 51A or the fundamental duties of our citizens, that is to preserve and cherish the rich cultural heritage of our country. So this was the reason behind bringing up a new Indianized version of statue of Lady Justice. Now let us try to note what kind of changes have been there. So similarly, there is no blindfold. First point which we need to note over here, this is the old statue or the westernized Lady Justice, this is the Indianized Lady Justice. So first of all we can note over here is that there is no blindfold. What does this mean? That law is not blind. Law is not blind, and for the law to be impartial, it does not needs to be blind. And ultimately, since law is not blind, it is open to the suffering of people, and ultimately it takes the concept of equality before law and adds to it the equal protection of law as well. Why? Because ultimately, since the law is not blind, it is witnessing the sufferings and the deprivations of various sections of our society, and since it is witnessing the various sections of our society in different light, that is why the element of equal protection of law is also getting integrated in this particular symbolism. The second point is that there is no robe, and robe has been replaced with sari. Now again, this is with respect to Indianizing the conception of Lady Justice, that is, it is more attuned to Indian traditions. Since robe is not worn by Indian women, and sari is a prominent, has found a very prominent place in the Indian attire of Indian women, and that is why it is more in line with the Indian traditions, culture and heritage. The third important point which we need to note over here are the scales. So the scales are present in both the earlier statue and the present statue, and it represents the same thing, that weighing of the arguments and being objective. And last point which we need to note over here is the sword is being replaced by the constitution, which means that the constitution is supreme and our legal system is not retributive. That is, its responsibility is not only to punish but to reform. And constitution will provide a guiding light, or constitution will be a guiding light in reforming the people who are the persons who are providers of legal system. Okay, so this was all about the comparison with respect to the new legal statute which has been unveiled by the Supreme Court or the Chief Justice of our country. This was all about this topic. Now let's come to the next topic. So the next topic for our discussion is Pradhan Mantri Bhartiya Janaushadhi Pariyojana. So now let's try to understand this particular topic. So the context, going by the same logical sequence, what is the context? So recently in the month of October 2024, the medicinal sales by the Pradhan Mantri Bhartiya Janaushadhi Pariyojana, it crossed a very important milestone of rupees 1,000 crores in the fiscal year of 2025. And ultimately, to get a very comparative understanding of it, the same sales revenue by this particular scheme in the previous fiscal year was achieved in the month of December 2023. So what we can see, what it can actually indicate are the growing sales volume with respect to the Janaushadhi Yojana of the Government of India. So now let us try to understand about the various nuances, objectives and features of this particular scheme. So about the PMBJP, or in full form Pradhan Mantri Bhartiya Janaushadhi Pariyojana, this initiative of the scheme, it started from the year of 2008 as a very humble small initiative by the Department of Pharmaceutical. And this Department of Pharmaceutical, since it's a department, it functions under the Ministry of Chemicals and Fertilizer. So what happened in the year of 2008, that Department of Pharmaceuticals along with certain central public sector enterprises which are working in the field of pharma or pharmaceuticals, they came together to actually provide quality generic medicines. Quality generic medicines to the masses. To the masses of our country, and within these masses, especially to the most vulnerable and marginalized sections. And who are these vulnerable and marginalized sections? Especially the poor, the beggars or the destitute, or any person who wants to avail quality generic medicines at a lower cost. At a lower cost as compared to the medicines which are available at the market. So what is the primary benefit that we can actually infer from such kind of generic medicines? That is, if any individual is able to avail medicines at a lower cost, so definitely the out-of-pocket expenditure, which combines a very important substantial component of overall expenditure which a person is spending on healthcare, so it is going to reduce. So this was the core aim or the aim of the Pradhan Mantri Bhartiya Janaushadhi Pariyojana. However, in the year of 2015, this scheme was changed or reformed by the name of Pradhan Mantri Bhartiya Janaushadhi Pariyojana. Before that, it was just called as Janaushadhi Initiative. So this was all about the aim of it. However, now let's try to come and understand the core objectives of this particular scheme. So this scheme has three major objectives. It's very easy to understand in this way. Three major objectives. Firstly, to ensure access to quality generic medicine. Secondly, to change the perception. To change the perception of the people. What kind of perception? So basically, every customer who is availing the drugs, they have a perception ready in their minds. That is, they believe that if the cost of the medicine is higher, definitely their therapeutic values and its efficacy or efficiency will be higher of those drugs. And government, with the help of the PMBJP initiative, it wants to demolish this established perception in the minds of the people that whenever they are paying higher for the drugs, then only the medicine is correct. No, it is not like that. So as we already noted that the generic medicines which the government of India is providing with the help of this particular scheme is already 50 to 80% cheaper as compared to the same drugs which are available in the market under certain brand name. Okay. So through this, Government of India wants to change the perception which is quite prevalent in the healthcare sector. And the third is to provide employment opportunities. And how the government is able to provide employment opportunity through this particular scheme? Because ultimately all these medicines will be issued through Janaushadhi Kendras, JAK in short. And these JAK can be initiated or started by any entrepreneur, any individual entrepreneur, or any civil society organization, or any NGO or SHG. So if these organizations, any individual or any society are having those members who are having certain pharma degrees like bachelors of pharma, minimum this degree, so these will be able to apply for the opening of Janaushadhi Kendras. And by actually getting or opening such kind of JAK or Janaushadhi Kendras, the individuals who are involved in the opening of it, they will be getting revenue out of the total sales which they are making through their Janaushadhi Kendras. So these are the primary three objectives which the government of India is trying to achieve with the help of PMBJP initiative. Now let us try to understand the features of it. So the first feature which we will dwell is its implementation. So one thing we need to know that there is a very important autonomous organization by the name of PMBI. It is a short form for Pharmaceutical and Medical Devices Bureau of India, which was established in the year of 2008 under the Department of Pharmaceuticals only. Now this particular autonomous organization is responsible for the implementation of Janaushadhi Kendras or the overall functioning of the Pradhan Mantri Bhartiya Janaushadhi Pariyojana. So what does it do? It provides for the coordination in procurement, sales, transportation and marketing of generic drugs. So in that case, the PMBI plays a very significant role in operationalizing the functioning of this particular scheme. The second important point which we need to note over here is that the owners of or the proprietors of the Janaushadhi Kendras are provided incentives to the tunes of 20% of the drugs procured by them. And this 20% incentive which these individuals are getting can avail a maximum of rupees 20,000. Now similarly, Government of India also provides a rupees 2 lakh incentive, 2 lakh one-time payment or incentives if the Janaushadhi Kendras are being opened at hilly regions, aspirational districts which is recognized by the Niti Aayog, or any EWS or left-wing extremist areas, the areas which are hit by Naxalism. So these are the various incentives, and this incentive of rupees 2 lakh is provided to the owners for two purposes: to get the furnitures for that particular shop, and secondly to get the computers as well. Now the third important feature which we need to understand is about the drug procurement. So as we already noted that the PMBI, Pharmaceutical and Medical Devices Bureau of India, it caters for the procurement of various kind of generic drugs from the industry. So ultimately it is very mandated within the scheme that all the drugs which are procured it should be procured from WHO Best Manufacturing Practices Certified Agencies. So WHO basically provides for a certification by the name of Best Manufacturing Practices, which are being initiated by the pharmaceutical companies, and those pharmaceutical companies who are having such kind of certifications which is provided by the WHO, the PMBI will try to procure the generic drugs from those companies only. And as soon as once the procurement is done, the last leg of the feature is the quality assurance. So to make sure that whatever drugs that are being procured by the PMBI, they meet their therapeutic efficiencies and efficacies, these drugs undergo very thorough quality assurance processes. So how does it go about it? So basically under the PMBJP scheme, the drugs which are procured are tested in the labs, in certain laboratories which are certified by the National Accreditation Board for Laboratories and Testing Centers. So in these areas, the drugs will be tested for their efficacy so that the government will be able to ensure that whatever drugs they are procuring from the private sector, they are meeting the qualitative levels of those drugs, because then only those drugs will be able to actually provide certain benefits to the people who are purchasing it. So this was all about the 4 features of it as well. Now let us try to see what kind of achievement and impact does this particular scheme has had on the healthcare industry of our country and for the larger public as well. So the first point that we need to note over here is the coverage of it. Coverage of the stores. Now in the year of 2014, Janaushadhi Kendras were only having stores of 40 humble stores were there. But in a span of almost 10 years, that is when we are sitting in the year of 2024, the entire country is having Janaushadhi Kendras, more than 14,000 stores are there. So this actually highlights the kind of scale up operations which has taken place with respect to the establishment of such JAK or the Janaushadhi Kendras. The second is the product basket. Now you will be surprised to know that since India is already having almost 14,000 Janaushadhi Kendras, and these 14,000 Janaushadhi Kendras are having a product basket of almost 2,047 generic medicines along with more than 300 surgical devices, and these instruments are available at a very cheaper price as compared to the market. The third important point which we need to note over here is the customer footfall. Now, according to the report which was released by the Department of Pharmaceuticals, it noted that almost 1 million users are purchasing medicines from the Janaushadhi Kendras every day. So again, it's a very prominent achievement. And lastly, one thing which we need to note over here is the sales. Now, as we already noted in the context also, that recently in the month of October, till we reach the month of October, the Janaushadhi Kendras across the country has availed a sales of rupees 1,000 crores. And if we'll just see the graph, this graph also, when it started at a large scale in the year of 2014-15, the sales was only 7.3 crores for the entire fiscal year. And imagine when we are sitting over here in the year of 2024, in only 8 months we are able to, or 6 months we are able to toll the sales for roughly to the tunes of 1,000 crores. And this year the government of India is targeting the total sales by Janaushadhi Kendras to be 1,400 crores. Imagine, that is the growth that the Janaushadhi Kendras are showing. And lastly, the savings to the customers. So recently, our Ministry of Health and Family Welfare Minister, that is JP Nadda, while answering a question to the Parliament, he had commented that with the help of this particular initiative or the Janaushadhi Kendras, the people or the customers were able to save almost 28,000 crore rupees. So which led to the reduction in the out-of-pocket expenditure by the patients. And going by the same tendencies or by the same pattern, we can actually bode very well for this particular initiative, because ultimately it is not only providing cheaper medicines to the customers, but it is also providing a lot of employment as well, because every Janaushadhi Kendra which is being opened, it is providing an opportunity for an entrepreneur so that they can invest in opening of a particular shop. So ultimately it's a win-win situation both for the public health sector of our country and also to provide very meaningful, remunerative employment opportunities for the people of our country. So this was all about this particular topic. Now let's come to the next topic, which is application of bone ossification test in law. So now let's try to understand what is this bone ossification test, what do we mean by the term bone ossification, and why we are learning this topic in the first place. So now let's try to come to the context. So recently a very unfortunate event had taken place, that a murder had been committed of former MLA, which was quite in news, that is Baba Siddiqui. And this murder was committed in Mumbai. And the prime accused in the murder of Baba Siddiqui, he claimed, after getting nabbed, he claimed that he is a minor. According to Indian law, a person who is below the age of 18 is considered to be minor. So this prime accused claimed that he is a minor, and since he is a minor, he should be governed under the Act of Juvenile Justice, Care and Protection of Children, Act of 2015, and the harsher provisions of BNS, Bhartiya Nyaya Sanhita, or Bhartiya Nagarik Suraksha Sanhita, BNSS, should not apply to this primary accused for one reason only, because he is a minor. Now, as we know that the criminal justice system of our country is not only retributive. What do we mean by retributive is that the purpose of criminal justice system is not only to punish the particular person who came in violation of the act. The purpose of criminal justice system of any liberal and a progressive democracy is not only to punish, but also for a reformative purpose. That is, any criminal justice system should be able to reform the person who has committed a crime. And that is why our criminal justice system treats persons who are in violation of any law and who are below the age of 18 in a very different light, and there is a separate act by the name of Juvenile Justice, Care and Protection of Children Act of 2015, which provides for separate mechanisms and processes dealing with such kind of delinquent juveniles which are there in our country. However, what had happened that as soon as this prime accused had claimed that he is below 18, the magistrate, after having ascertained through his Aadhaar copy that he was 19 years, but still the magistrate offered a bone ossification test. And what is the purpose of this bone ossification test? Simply to determine the age of a particular individual. As simple as that. So this was the core context behind it. Now let us try to go to the nitty-gritties of what do we actually mean by bone ossification. What is the need for bone ossification test? What is the processes involved? So now let us come to the core concept of bone ossification. Firstly, to understand bone ossification test, we need to understand what is bone ossification. Bone ossification, or the term ossification, means formation. And the bone ossification has similar synonyms as well. For example, osteogenesis or bone mineralization. Bone mineralization. Now, from the name itself of the bone ossification, it means that process of bone formation in a body. Biological process of bone formation in our body. Now, this bone formation, the process of bone formation starts from very early developmental stages. Very early developmental stages. That is, it starts from when we as humans are as small as an embryo. So the bone formation or bone ossification process starts from when we are an embryo, and it goes on till later adolescence, till age of 25. Now, one important thing which we need to note over here is that the entire bone ossification process, it starts from conversion of simple soft tissues like these or cartilage to a full mature grown bone. And the formation of or the transformation of a cartilages or the soft tissues to bone, it is governed by various factors as well. And since it is governed by various factors, the bone formation or the process of bone formation for every individual, it varies, because ultimately the overall bone ossification process is based on or is influenced by several factors. So what are these several factors? So the first of all is nutrition. Second, what kind of diet, etc. that individual is getting. Secondly, what kind of environment this particular person is positioned. And thirdly, the genetics. So from what we can see is that these three factors are quite dominant, and they can bring in a good degree of changes with respect to what an individual experiences with respect to how their particular bone growth is taking place. Now, as we know that in the process of bone ossification, it starts from soft tissue, which is cartilage, and as a particular person matures or ages, their bone grows, and ultimately it reaches the stage of a mature bone. And what we can say that for every age, say for example, it is 1 month, it is say 1 year, it is 5 years, it is 10 years, it is 20 years. So every stage of bone growth can be categorized to a time. So every stage of bone growth can be time stamped. And scientist uses this classification of bone with respect to its time stamping to determine an approximate age of the individual for whom the bone is being scrutinized. So this is the core issue with respect to the or core concept which is associated with bone ossification. However, then what is bone ossification test? Now, bone ossification test is nothing but a medical procedure which is based on the concept of bone ossification that we just learned. So what we do in this medical procedure is that we take the X-ray of an individual's bone. And what are these bones? Especially clavicle or sternum. Sternum is our collarbone. Clavicle is our shoulder bone. Sternum is collar or hip bone. And why such kind of X-ray? Why these bones are only considered to be taken X-ray to determine the age of an individual? Because ultimately these bones, they undergo drastic changes throughout their stages of growth as compared to the other bones, because these are such kind of bones which show greater degree of maturity or greater changes. So whenever a scientist is trying to observe the X-ray of such bones, by proper classification of or the growth of a bone, they will be able to compare it. So what it does is that as soon as the X-ray is done, now the experts will view the X-ray, will view or observe the X-ray of the bones which we discussed right now, and thirdly, they will compare it with the standard bone growth or developmental trajectory. So what happens is that as soon as the X-ray is done, then the expert, it will compare the X-ray of that particular bone with the standard bone growth model. Or since we already know that that the bones of individuals, they grow in a very gradual manner, and every stage of life the bones can be categorized, and then the experts will try to map it or have a good correlation with what kind of bone it is being trying to correlate with the standard bone growth. And such kind of models are Pyle and Grulich Atlas. Pyle and Grulich Atlas. It is nothing but a standard bone growth model. And based on the comparison with the standard bone growth model, the experts will be able to come up to an approx age. And this is how ultimately bone ossification test will help determine the approximate age of an individual. Why approx age? Because ultimately we had noted earlier also that the entire process of bone ossification is dependent on various factors like nutrition, diet and genetics, and that is why we will never be able to pinpoint the exact age. However, it is very well accepted in the industry as well that it provides in the range of plus minus 2 years. So now let us try to come to the next section, which is the criminal justice system and age determination. Now we already noted that our criminal justice system treats the persons who are in violation of the law in different ways. If an individual is below the age of 18, that is if he or she is minor, then criminal justice system is structured in a different way to cater to such individuals. However, if a person who is accused or in violation of a law is more than 18 years of age, then normal course of routine will take place, and our criminal justice system with the help of Bhartiya Nyaya Sanhita and Bhartiya Nagarik Suraksha Sanhita will take care of the entire processes and mechanisms. Now, as we already know that there are many situations where if under the Juvenile Justice Care and Protection of Children Act 2015, it says that if any minor is found to be in violation of law, then such accused persons or minors will not go to the courts. However, they will be put forward in front of Juvenile Justice Board, and this Juvenile Justice Board will try to examine the case of that particular minor, and then according to the kind of crime which the minor has committed, they will provide for either any kind of community service, or they will release the child, or they might put the minor into observation homes for a certain period of time. However, to protect the right of the children so that they should not be considered as an adult and they should be considered as minor only, it provides that ultimately the section 94 of the Juvenile Justice Act, it provides that it is the responsibility of the Juvenile Justice Board to ascertain whether the children is a minor or not. And how does the criminal justice system will identify the age of it? Through bone ossification test. However, one important point also we need to note over here is that the same section 94 of the Juvenile Justice Act, it says that to determine the age, first of all, the primary source of evidence is the documentary evidence. That is such kind of evidences which are available on the documents. For example, our birth certificate, our school certificates. So since we know that our birth certificate and Aadhaar or school certificates also carry our birth date, so with the help of that documents also we can determine the age of an individual. However, if these documentary evidences are not present, or there is an anomaly with respect to the documentary evidences which are present, for example, the birth date is not matching in Aadhaar and the birth certificate, in such case only bone ossification test has to be conducted, so as to make sure and ensure that the rights of the minor or rights of the juvenile are protected. The second application of bone ossification test in criminal justice system is in the immigration laws. Sometimes what happens that if there is an illegal migrant, say for example a person who crossed the border from Bangladesh to India, and that particular refugee is claiming to be a minor. In those cases, bone ossification test is done so as to make sure that the person is, whether he is a minor or not, because if the person who is illegally migrating into India, and if he or she is a minor, then they will be protected under international laws. Protected under international refugee protection norms. So in these cases also, bone ossification test plays a very critical and an important role. However, now let us try to understand what does the Supreme Court has held the view with respect to the use of bone ossification test. So the Supreme Court in its two judgment, first judgment was Jarnail Singh versus State of Haryana in the year of 2013, and second judgment was Arnit Das versus Bihar in 2020. Supreme Court held that the bone ossification test, or BOT for short, should be the last resort. Why? Because Supreme Court prodded all the investigative agencies that before you go on and commit to the bone ossification test, all the investigative agencies should go on towards the finding of the documentary evidences, birth certificates, school certificates, Aadhaar documents, and if these documents are not available, or the datas which are present in those certificates are not matching, then only the bone ossification test should be used, but as a last resort, because ultimately it is the bone ossification test which is not accurate. That is, we already noted that the test provides an approximate age in the age bracket of plus minus 2 years. And the Supreme Court has also guided the other courts of our country also that whenever any kind of test of a bone ossification test comes, courts are allowed to take the higher range of the age so as to protect the rights of the minors which are involved in the violation of a particular act. So this was all about this particular topic. Now let's come to the next topic, which is Doctrine of Lis Pendens. So what is this doctrine all about? So recently the Supreme Court was hearing a review petition against a judgment which was provided by the High Court, and while providing the judgment to the review petition, the Supreme Court invoked the doctrine of Lis Pendens. Doctrine of Lis Pendens. And what is this doctrine of Lis Pendens? So now let's try to understand what do we actually mean by the doctrine of Lis Pendens. So Lis Pendens in term, this term means pending litigation. Pending litigation. Now this doctrine is actually used in the transfer or cases which is related to the transfer of immovable properties. What are immovable properties? For example, land, bungalow, flats, etc., which are immovable in nature. And what does this doctrine says? Let us try to understand in a very simple manner. But what is the underlying principle based on which this particular doctrine is resting? So the principle emerges from the common law principle, that is ut lit pendente nihil innovator. This means that when a litigation is pending, no new interest should be drawn to that particular property. So what does this doctrine actually means? Let us try to understand it in a very, very simple manner. Suppose this is a piece of land. Now there is a person called A and there is a person called B. and a litigation is pending over this piece of land. Both A and B are claiming to be the owner of this piece of land, and both A and B has gone to the court. Now the litigation is going on and it is sub judice, and the final verdict of the court or the competent court has not come up as of now. Now, so ultimately, when the litigation is pending, both A and B cannot claim to be the owners of this particular piece of land, because ultimately it is the competent court which will decide who is going to be the owner of this particular land. Now imagine a situation that while the litigation is pending, B sells this land to C, and C thought that this particular person C was not aware of the impending litigation of this particular land, and person B sold the land to C, and now C is claiming to be the owner of land. And that is why this kind of complexity, to avoid this kind of complexity, the doctrine of lis pendens was innovated by the various global jurisprudence only. That ultimately it says that whenever there is a case involving the ownership rights over an immovable property, the doctrine of lis pendens, it says that there cannot be a transfer of land in these cases. And secondly, even if the transfer of property has taken place from one party to another, it does not hamper the right of the property of a party which is a party to the original dispute. That is, even if when B has sold the land to the C, and after that, imagine a situation, after that court has provided a judgment providing that the A is the actual owner. So then in that case, C cannot claim that ultimately he was not aware of whatever issues were pending, or that there was a litigation which was going on with respect to the land. And that is the core essence or the meaning of doctrine of lis pendens. And what is the rationale behind or motivation behind doctrine of lis pendens? Firstly, to secure rights of property. Secondly, to make sure such complex transfer of property should not take place, or to restrict transfer of property. But this is the core essence with respect to the doctrine of lis pendens. But what are those conditions on which the doctrine of lis pendens can be applied? First of all, as we already noted, that is the core lis pendens, which means that a litigation is pending. Second important condition is that the litigation should not be frivolous. That is, it should not be malafide, or it should not be generated through bad intentions. And thirdly, that there should not be transfer of property. However, there is an exception to it, that is, there can be a transfer of property in certain cases. However, if the court allows. If the court allows, then only under very strict supervision of the court, there can be a transfer of property from one party to another. That is the core essence with respect to the doctrine of lis pendens. Topics like such kind of legal doctrines you can expect only in the prelim examination. As of now, there, according to the precedents which has been said by the UPSC, no such questions has been asked. However, it can be a very good potential question for the prelim examination. Now let's come to the next topic, which is legal authority to recruit civil volunteers in police. So these are from the picture itself you can see that it is a civic volunteer and he is wearing a kind of a uniform. So now let us try to understand what is this issue all about. So recently, what is the context behind it? So recently, as we already noted that in the month of August, a very ghastly incident has taken place in city of Kolkata, in RG Kar Medical Hospital, where a resident doctor was brutally raped and murdered. And the Supreme Court is hearing that particular case, and while hearing, Supreme Court asked the West Bengal government that the prime accused who was there in the rape and murder of that particular doctor was found to be a civic police volunteer. So Supreme Court was interested to know more about this civic police volunteer, and Supreme Court asked the West Bengal government that how did this CPV or civic police volunteer had access to such sensitive places like hospitals at a very awkward point of time, that is at the midnight. How come this CPV was having an access to sensitive places like hospitals? How these CPVs are recruited? What are their eligibility conditions? Who is recruiting them? What are their working conditions? And what is the ultimate source of their authority? So these were the questions which were put forward by the Supreme Court to the representative of the West Bengal government, and that is why we are trying to understand and learn this particular topic. So now let us try to come to the point of what do we actually mean by civic police volunteers or CPVs. So CPVs are nothing but contractual workers. Contractual workers who are actually inducted by the police department of a particular police division to assist or help whom? The core police department in performance of some non-core activities or non-core or non-crime activities. What are those activities? They will try to help the police in managing traffic in busy intersections, managing traffics in very busy road intersections. Secondly, to manage crowd during festivals. For example, during the Navratri or Durga Puja, as so called in the state of West Bengal, these civic police volunteers, they manage a great degree of crowd. They also manage parking. They become an eye for illegal felling of trees. Illegal felling of trees in the city. So these are the core non-police like activities which is being provided by the civic police volunteers, and through performance of such activities they are able to assist the police and lessen their workload, Now one important thing which we need to note over here is that according to the Bureau of Police Research and Development, which is an autonomous organization which is working under the Ministry of Home Affairs, there are almost 7,000 civic police volunteers in the city of Kolkata itself and almost 1.3 lakh in the overall state of West Bengal. If we need to contrast this number with the actual number of police personnel which are present there in West Bengal, so in place of 1.3 lakhs of civic police volunteers, the overall West Bengal is having almost 70,000 police personnels. So one very starking and a very appalling fact which is very evident from this thing is that civic police volunteers is almost twice the actual number of police personnel which are present there in the West Bengal. Apart from that, what we also need to note over here, that the West Bengal government, they provide a daily wage of 300 rupees per day as an honorarium which amounts for almost rupees 9,000 per month to such particular persons or persons who are inducted as civic police volunteers. Now let us try to understand what is the eligibility and process of induction of such kind of persons. So eligibility, with respect to the eligibility, first of all, residence is one criteria. So any person, all the persons who are inducted as civic police volunteers are positioned or located or posted in the areas where they are residing in the police thanas. So these recruited CPVs or civic police volunteers are positioned in the police thanas which are near to their residences. So residence becomes a particular important eligibility criteria. So for example, any particular police station is trying to recruit the civic police volunteers, then they will consider youth who are belonging to that particular region only and not outside. Second is the educational qualification. So any person who has passed the class of 8th, they will be able or eligible to participate in the process of induction of CPVs. The third important point which we need to note over here is the age. Any person who is above the years of 20 years of age, they should be able to apply for the positions of civic police volunteers. And lastly, there should be no criminal antecedents. That persons belonging from criminal background will not be eligible to apply for the post of civic police volunteers. So these are the 4 important criteria with respect to the induction into the civic police volunteers. However, what is the process of induction? So now let us try to understand the process. So the entire process starts from order by the Department of Home and Hill Affairs. So there is a issuing of order by the Department of Home and Hill Affairs of the West Bengal government along with an enrollment notice. By the Police Commissioner of West Bengal. Secondly, as soon as this order has been passed, a 3-member committee is constituted. And who are the members in this 3-member committee? Firstly, a deputy commissioner who is heading this particular committee. Secondly, an assistant commissioner. And thirdly, a officer of inspector rank. Now these 3-member committee will vet or scrutinize the various applications which are received by the police department for the induction of civic police volunteers in a particular area. And after going through the various application forms which are being presented by various unemployed youth or the youth who are interested in becoming a part of the CPV, ultimately after getting the due scrutiny and examination, these people are recruited and are provided a 2-month training where they are informed about their jobs and job roles and what kind of functions they are intended to perform. So this is the core process with respect to the induction of civic police volunteers. However, what we need to understand also is what has been the genesis of this particular case, like the genesis of this scheme. Why did the government of West Bengal try to establish such kind of schemes at first place? So the first point which we need to note over here is that it started in a very humble way in the year of 2008 when there was a government of Communist Party of India, Marxist. So during the year of 2008, what the government of West Bengal did at that point of time is that they received a friendly proposal from 2 major industries. One was Hyundai and second was Bharat Cements. So what they did is that as soon as they received a proposal, and the proposal from Hyundai and Bharat Cements, they requested the government to involve unemployed youth in assisting police to do what? To manage traffic in busy intersections. And at that point of time, this particular idea which was forwarded by the Hyundai and Bharat Cements, that point of time the mayor of Kolkata, he entertained this particular idea, and they recruited around 500 civic police volunteers to help the police in managing traffic at very busier intersections of the Kolkata city. However, in the year of 2012, when Mamata Banerjee government had been formed after 34 years of ending of the 34-year long CPI Marxist rule, Mamata Banerjee government tried to expand this particular scheme. And decided to recruit almost 1.3 lakh civic police volunteers for two reasons. Firstly, it will be able to, what were the major reasons? Firstly, it will be able to lessen the workload of police. Secondly, gainful employment. And thirdly, less burden on the exchequer. That is, the government is able to avail the benefits of these civic police volunteers at a very low cost, because ultimately government is paying only 9,000 rupees as an honorarium, and 9,000 rupees is a very low cost to the government exchequer, because in place of recruiting more and more police officials, government is able to use the labor of such CPVs in a very low cost. And that is the core genesis of this particular scheme. However, there are certain issues with respect to the functioning of civic police volunteers. The first being the ad hocism in recruitment. Now, there was a 2021 NHRC, or the National Human Rights Commission report, on the state of post-poll violence in Bengal. Post-poll violence in West Bengal, and it had noted certain points with respect to the functioning of civic police volunteers in the state of West Bengal. The first point this report had noted, was the ad hocism in recruitment. It said that this particular ad hocism in recruitment was also substantiated by the High Court of West Bengal, which it had noted that it was physically impossible that a 3-member committee will be able to vet almost 1,300 candidates in a day. So here the court also noted, and various kind of political commentators and observers also noted, that a lot of ad hocism is going on in the recruitment, and various kind of 3-member committees which are being constituted by the police department for every area is trying to handpick their own particular persons. And ultimately it is fueling corruption. The second point which we need, the particular report noted, is the political patronage. That is, ultimately police is working under the political executive only, and the recruitment of various CPVs or the civic police volunteers become a route to reward the their political members, or the grassroots political members, like poster boys or any say party member or a low ranking party member. So the political parties were able to accommodate the opportunistic political party members as one of the CPVs. The third was lack of training. The report also noted that since these CPVs are only provided 2 months training, these people are not even equipped to handle very difficult kind of situations like handling mob pressures or trying to handle traffic in a very scientific manner. And the last was very low chances of career progression. low chances of career progression, so that ultimately there are lesser avenues for the civic police volunteers to go for the career progression, and it was so ad hoc in nature that any particular person who is joining these particular forces are not able to visualize how their career is going to progress eventually when they are going to spend time in the forces. And the last point was the nexus, Gunda nexus. That is because the same thing actually manifested in the RG Kar Medical College rape case as well, that such kind of civic police volunteers, since they are very close to the power authority and they use these influence to actually go for more corruption and violence in their neighborhood, in their own neighborhood. So these are the major issues with the functioning of civic police volunteers which are being instituted in the state of West Bengal. So this was all about this issue. Let's come to the next topic.